Hello everybody. I know we are a little bit behind with our midweek thoughts for the day, but this week we're catching up and we are thinking about Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. So I'm going to start by reading a bit of Mark 11. When they were approaching Jerusalem at Bethphage and Bethany, near the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples and said to them, Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it. If anyone says to you, Why are you doing this? Just say this, the Lord needs it and will send it back here immediately. They went away and found a colt tied near a door outside the street. As they were untying it, some of the bystanders said to them, What are you doing untying the colt? They told them what Jesus had said, and they allowed him to take it. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leaf-free branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest heaven. Then he entered Jerusalem and went into the temple, and when he had looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. So that's our Bible reading for this week, and we are following through with the Nick Page book called The Longest Week. So it's good. I'm really enjoying reading it, and so this week I was reminded of a few things, and also I think I learnt a few things that I probably hadn't actually known before. I'm getting to an age where I read something and think, did I know that? Well, maybe I did quite a long time ago. So Nick Page has reminded us in the chapter about what Jerusalem was actually like. So Jerusalem is a city built on a hill, and in Jesus' time it was a really quite a divided city between the rich and the poor. So Herod the Great had rebuilt the temple, and so when you ask people about this, it's like that great time when Herod was rebuilding it, and when Jesus says he will rip down the temple and build it up again in 3 days, this is in the context of people having seen lots and lots of building work happening at the temple. So Nick talks quite a lot about the economics of what's happening in Jerusalem. So Herod had rebuilt the courts of the temple, not the inside of the temple, the courts of the temple, and it had been large, there were colonnades, it was a much bigger place, it was faced with marble and had gold, and kind of ironically, people were able to then come to the temple for the times of festival because of the peace of the Romans. So pilgrims came from the Jews spread out throughout the Roman Empire. It was safe for them to travel, so they travelled to Jerusalem. They brought money, and they also sponsored some of this great building works which was happening around the temple. So it was making Jerusalem a kind of tourist stroke pilgrim place to go, and that was bringing money into the city economy. But that's not how most ordinary people in Jerusalem lived. Jerusalem had a very poor water supply for a lot of its time, and water was really important for Jews for ritual purity. So the idea about scarcity of water brings into stark relief what Jesus says when he says, if anyone gives even one of these people a glass of water, a cup of water in my name, they are giving me that water. That brings that into a kind of sharper focus for us. So whilst some people high up in Jerusalem, literally high up, were living in palaces or fancy places with lots of space, probably they had water for them collected in some way. There are a lot of people also living in Jerusalem in kind of slum dwellings with open sewers running down the streets. If it did rain, those living nearer the bottom would have all the kind of horrible stuff coming towards them down their streets. There would be sewage and blood and all this sort of stuff from the sacrifices, and all this sort of thing would be running down towards areas, and families would be crammed in one room, as was typical actually in various sort of Roman type cities at that point, that the cities were cramped. And you think about Jesus, he doesn't normally stay in Jerusalem. He walks out to Bethany because there's room for him to stay there. So even at the end of this story, he travels back out to Bethany to stay the night, because honestly, there were 13 of them. Where do you find spare room for 13? So this is what Jerusalem was like. It had some very opulent parts, and it had some really difficult, cramped parts. Now, the thing which I'm not sure that I ever really knew, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, about how the robes, the high priest's robes for celebrating Passover, were kept by the Romans and were handed over to the high priest just for the duration of the festivals. They were kind of held hostage. So as Jesus was arriving on his colt, his donkey, and people were greeting him, he was coming in through the poorer parts of the city. But coming from the west through the Joppa Gate, the same day, possibly even at the same time, was Pilate. So Pilate was arriving with soldiers, with Roman soldiers, to support Pilate during the Passover festival, because it was recognised this could be a really volatile time. They didn't have a lot of Romans garrisoned necessarily in Jerusalem. So for Passover, Pilate arrived to hand the vestments to the high priest. And Nick Page says it's a bit like handing over someone the car key just for a week. So Pilate arrives and he brings with him reinforcements, because there had been trouble in Jerusalem at Passover before. So as Jesus is preparing for celebrating the festival, the city is really a maelstrom of emotion. So the Romans are coming in through one gate with a kind of show of strength, a show of their oppressive power. Jesus is arriving on a donkey, which may look foolish to the Romans, but all the Jews know this is a sign of a messianic entry, that Jesus is the Messiah. So there's this kind of two-headed pronged procession coming into the city on the same day, the Romans and Jesus. And it's difficult for us to imagine what the emotions were for the people who were there in the city at that time. What hopes they had, what fears they had, whether they thought there was going to be trouble, whether they thought there was going to be victory, whether they thought the Romans would be actually going to oppress them so badly and stamp on any sort of uprising, whether they believed this was the time that God would prove that he was on their side at last. So we start this week with a city full of expectations. Now we have the most tremendous spoiler for this, because we know what happens. We know that Jesus dies. We know that Jesus is resurrected. The people in the city at this point do not know that. They know that God is moving, and they have no idea what the end of this story is going to be. So as we think about Palm Sunday as we know it, the arrival of the Romans and of Jesus in amongst the religious festival, it carries with it all those expectations and hopes of the people. And as we follow this story, as we approach Easter, it's important for us to bear in mind that those people had no idea of actually how God was going to act. So we wait with them to see what is going to happen, and we follow this story through until Easter. So that's the triumphal entry, some of the background about it, and the book that we are using is called The Longest Week by Nick Page. To get hold of it, you can get it on Kindle, or you can buy a copy if you would like to read it and you haven't got a copy and would like me to try and get you one. I will find one for you. So keep well, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.